Morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Cradle-to-Career Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting. So special welcome to our advisory board members, to the Cradle-to-Career team, to members of the public who are listening in. As you may know, my name is Marianne Bates. I'm the Executive Director of Cradle-to-Career. And just a note, as we were just discussing, we're going to have patience today. There's weather, there's wind, and people's connections might come and go. So we're just going to be flexible and do the best that we can with that. We'll start with a note on translation services. So interpretation services are available for today's advisory board meeting via the Zoom webcast. To listen to comments and questions given in Spanish, please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, then select language interpretation audio and your language, Spanish, and you will then hear a live rendering of the comment in Spanish. And at this stage, I'd like to turn it over to our partners who are providing the translation for some further comments and explanation.
Fabiola, are you able to provide the update in Spanish quickly? And then I'll put you in the Spanish room.
Yes, I'm sorry. Buenos días. Estamos proporcionando el día de hoy servicios de interpretación. Si necesitan servicios de interpretación, por favor, opriman el globo que está en la parte de abajo de su pantalla para poder activar el servicio de interpretación.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, as we begin, I'd like to invite Jane Harrington to do the roll call to establish quorum for today's meeting.
Good morning, everybody. Please stay present when your name is called. Lauren Asher.
Present.
Tanisha James. Orcadia Largo.
Present.
Paige Leverin. Jackie Navarros.
Present.
Lisa Rodriguez.
Present.
Patricia Chavez.
Present.
Michelle Chang.
Present.
Meredith Curry.
Present.
Marcos Montes. Sara Sandhu. Ana Alvarado.
Present.
Nancy Joditis. Christopher Nellum.
Present.
Sasha Perez. Spade Viveros Walton.
Present.
I'm counting 10 present.
Thanks, Jane. So we have quorum and we'll move ahead. Let me provide an overview for today's meeting. We'll walk through the agenda and then dive right in. So we'll start by sharing a couple of updates about our office's work for your context, so you know where we're at. And then we'll review the new process that the governing board established for you as advisory board members to make official recommendations to the governing board. So we're going to walk through the specific pages of the governance manual that were updated at the governing board's meeting in February. Then we'll review upcoming meeting timelines and service terms, take a quick break, and then Shannon is going to be sharing a presentation on planned outreach and communications related to California colleges at EDU, and we'll then discuss supports, training, and outreach strategies that should accompany the release of the Cradle-to-Career dashboards. So for the first couple items, that's mostly informational, but please jump in with questions as you have them, and then Shannon will be looking for some of your input on those later items. For members of the public who are listening in, we'll be doing public comment as our last agenda item, and then we'll adjourn. All right, with that, we'll jump into the Executive Director's Office updates. Next slide, please. So as you know, our work covers three main areas. One is our work to build an analytical data set that links together data from our data partners across the state. And for that work, our focus for the last half year since we last met with you in the fall has been to complete the relevant procurements, to onboard our contractors, to launch a security policies task force, that's composed of the information security offices of our data partners, and to prepare detailed plans for file transfer with our data partners as well. Next slide. And here's a highlight of some of the relevant procurements for that analytical data set. When we last met, I think I described us being close to finish with the procurement for a system integrator. They are now on board, and we've also completed the other procurements here for a security consultant, project manager, and multiple components of the technology stack that we need to build the linked data set. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you a progress board that we're using internally to keep track of where we are with all of our different data partners. We have many of them, and it takes a lot of steps to prepare for receiving the data. So everything from starting by identifying our liaisons at the partner organizations to actually reviewing the draft file specification, participating in that security task force, and then in orange on the right, the actual formal process of transferring the data. What I'll show you next is a snapshot that I shared with our governing board at their February meeting of where we were at with our partners. So as you can see, many of these steps are complete for the initial work, like identifying partner liaisons, and then we're in process on the other steps. The actual data transfer has not yet occurred. In our participation agreement that we signed with our data partners, that review by the security task force of our security protocols and ensuring that the data system components are built and ready to receive the data happens first. So once those two stages are complete, that's when we'll then be ready to move on to having the formal file transfers from our data partners. So just wanted to provide a snapshot. The other thing I'll mention is that there's some points of the data set, like data from non-public universities that are scheduled for later on in our 5-year timeline. And so we've put work with those partners on pause for a moment and are focusing on working with the partners who will initially transfer data to us. So this is a snapshot of where we're at with this work. Wanted to also highlight the teacher training and retention dashboard. We'll be talking about this a bit later today and as well with our data and tools advisory board on Thursday. So by way of background, last year in February, the board discussed the scope of the dashboard and expanded the scope. Last summer, we launched task forces to refine data definitions, and then that dashboard was included in our work plan for this current fiscal year. And last fall, the board discussed the need for clarity on a process for adding data points to what we call the P20W data set. So that's that analytical data set that we're bringing together. Because to build this dashboard, we will need some data points that are not yet included in those legal agreements that we signed last year with our data partners. So in this past governing board meeting in February, the governing board defined a process for adding additional data points to the P20W data set. And that's described in the governance manual if you're interested. So the key next steps for our office is to continue to work with the data providers to clarify possible data points. Our user-centered design work is focusing on teacher dashboard relevant topics. And then the plan is for a more detailed from all involved parties in May. An update on where we are with our practical tools for students. So remember, there's 3 main areas of our work. One is this analytical data set that we're building with linked data from our partners. The second is that we partner with organizations like californiacolleges.edu and eTranscript California to bring to scale practical tools for students. So we'll be talking more about California Colleges later on in today's session. Shannon will be getting your input on some planned coordinated communications. If you go to the resources tab on our website, you can also look at our 12-month work plan and see on that there's a page dedicated to these tools where you can see the detailed technical implementation improvements that CCGI is making with data partners. And then eTranscript California, we haven't talked about as much in the past year because we focused first on californiacolleges.edu. And in our work plan, we identified the next 6 months as a time where we really want to do focus groups and interviews to understand the possibilities for eTranscript California in the future, understanding the needs of students and educators in higher education, to envision how we can work with our partners at eTranscript to bring to scale a platform that can transfer transcripts seamlessly across all higher education institutions. Next slide, please. So the third area of our work, I mentioned the analytical data set first, and then we talked about the practical tools for students and families. The third area of work is around engagement with communities. And there are a number of procurements that Shannon and colleagues have recently completed, one of which you're experiencing right now in this call. We're delighted to be working with language and interpretation services now for our live meetings. We've also completed a procurement for website design. We understand that the initial website that was built for Cradle-to-Career can be hard to navigate in some places, and some of the important information is buried a couple layers down. So we're really going to be focused on doing a website redesign during this coming year. And we're also have a planned procurement related to graphic design coming up. Cradle-to-Career branding. So a quick update on this. You provided some input in your past meetings, both on the logo overall. So we have, this is narrowed down now to 2 finalists for these 2 logos, and Shannon is working with a designer to finalize the selection and the refinement of this for a final logo for us. And you also provided feedback, and in our community conversations, we got input on our name and tagline, which is California's Cradle-to-Career data system, connecting data and insights to advance equitable futures. Excited to have some progress on that. Next slide. Highlighting a few press and community events that we participated in recently. Just want to put in a plug. If you are attending an event where you have an opportunity to share information about Cradle-to-Career, let us know. Shannon has resources and slide decks that we can share with you. We also want to help amplify that. If you would like us to join you at an event, let us know. We're happy to partner on that. The other piece I wanted to highlight is that Shannon and colleagues developed community guidelines collaboratively with the public through our community conversations events. We have a nice blog post about this on our news page on our website. And these community guidelines essentially outline what we at Cradle-to-Career want to hold ourselves to as we engage with members of the public, as we engage with you in meetings, and we invite others to join us in that as well. So if you have a moment, check out those community guidelines on our news page as well. Another project that we worked on that I really enjoyed was collaboratively developing staff values with the team. So we're sharing them here on the screen. We boiled it down to 5 key values, and have really enjoyed seeing how we can ensure that this isn't just, a poster in the break room that we forget about and, don't look at again, but really building it into our everyday work. So for example, as we think about our team development, our self-assessments, our performance reviews, we're building these staff values into that process so we can really aim to hold ourselves accountable to whether we're living up to these values. When we're hiring people, we look at these staff values to think about what kinds of questions we want to ask in the interviews, and ensure that this kind of guides our work start to finish. And looking at the value of advancing equity, really trying to have that shape our work plan. I do want to put in a plug. We recently had a community conversation where we invited advisory board members Chris Nellam and Vikash Reddy, who's from the Data and Tools Advisory Board, to join us for a conversation about the importance of disaggregating data for equity and how to think about racial equity in our work. So if you haven't yet, you can check out that recording for a community conversation, which was, I learned a lot from the conversation and really enjoyed it. And then the last part I'll just mention on these values, sometimes we approach this in a lighthearted way. So whenever I need to tell an embarrassing story about myself to the team, it's like, okay, Cradle-to-Career value, transparency. But it also is intended to guide our work when we're facing hard decisions. So for example, the curiosity component, right? If I'm facing a setback or if I'm having a hard interaction with someone, how can I approach that with curiosity, not frustration? So I'm sharing these because it's an important part of our work. We're aspiring to live up to these values and really want to use them as our North Star for decision making. All right, speaking of the team, we continue to do a lot of hiring. So I want to flag 2 positions that are open. We're currently have 2 positions, a senior data engineer and a budget and contracts analyst position open. Those close on April 6th. There's a QR code here that you can scan that goes to a filtered view of the CalCareers website where you can see our open positions. There are a number of other senior positions will be opening soon, a deputy director for communications, for legislative affairs, a research manager. So I really appreciate all that so many of you as advisory board members have been doing to get the word out about these positions. Please continue to do so, ensuring that we push our job postings out to as many people as possible, to your networks, to ensure that we're reaching all across California's communities is really important to us. We also recently hired a number of positions, our general counsel, our principal data architect, and the key for you, our new chief of strategic initiatives and partnerships. So I'd love to hand the mic over to Mary Kate for a moment so she can introduce herself, as she's your key liaison with the staff.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, members. My name is Mary Kate, and I'm very appreciative and excited about this new opportunity to join the team. I just wanted to share a quick bit about myself. I began my state career at the Medical Board of California as the board member liaison, so I'm well acquainted with working with members and super excited to be working with you all. Most recently, I worked at the Department of Consumer Affairs, where I led new data initiatives and performed data analysis and collection for all 37 boards and bureaus that DCA serves. Additionally, I spearheaded many special projects for the department's board and bureau relations, such as the board member orientation training, as well as a training for board leadership that taught them about best practices and, how to run a public meeting gracefully. So super excited to be here. Thank you all, and I look forward to what the future holds.
Thank you, Mary Kate. We're thrilled to have her on the team. I think this is day 4 for her, so we're excited that she's already jumped right in with today's first public meeting. All right, and we can go to the next slide, please. Budget update. So we put in a budget request. The governing board reviewed that at our August meeting last year, and it was included in the governor's January 10 proposed budget. The budget request was for approximately $4.9 million in ongoing funding, which includes 10 additional positions, which would bring our staff team to a total of 26. And I also wanted to flag, we had a hearing in Senate Subcommittee 4 on March 16th. If you're interested in listening to that, you can go ahead and look at the recording. For that hearing, we put together a one-pager, which is intentionally far too small for you to read, but Shannon has just dropped a link to it in the chat. And it's just one page that outlines our mission and vision, and then talks about the 3 problems that we're trying to address and the 3 ways we're working on that, and just provides kind of a one-page overview of Cradle-to-Career's work. So if you're looking for kind of a one-page summary of what Cradle-to-Career is about, this is something that you can share. So the link is dropped in the chat, and please feel free to make use of that. Okay, before I dive into the next section, let me just pause for a second and see if there are any questions from our advisory board members related to the update that I just shared. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet. So we're now going to dive into some pretty specific details from the governance manual. So if you have it handy, you can look at your governance manual. I'm also going to have on the screen cut and pasted the relevant sections of it. So let's talk about process for a moment. Last November, the C2C governing board tasked an ad hoc committee of that governing board with making annual updates to the Cradle-to-Career governance manual. So as you may recall, the governance manual is kind of the living document that describes all of the policies and procedures that are relevant for the Cradle-to-Career governing board and for the 2 advisory boards. So the governing board has an annual process where they update this document. And so that advisory board was tasked with annual updates. That ad hoc committee of the governing board drew on ideas generated by a separate ad hoc committee that was composed of you and your colleagues on the Data and Tools Advisory Board that met on December 16th. So as you'll recall from our last meeting, we asked for volunteers to be a part of this ad hoc committee, and those advisory board members generated ideas relevant to advisory board governance that then informed what the governing board took into their annual updates. So what I'm now going to do is walk through those changes that the governing board made relevant to advisory board governance, because that's relevant for future meetings and the timelines. And I also just want to acknowledge, you are the inaugural advisory board. Everything that we're doing is new. And so we're doing our best to think ahead about how we can best support you, how to create structures and processes that really support the work of the advisory board. But we're all going to learn together as we go through these processes for the first time. So now I'll walk through the details that were in the governance manual. So first, big picture overview. The edits, some of the edits were intended to align language on the responsibilities of each advisory board with the language that's in Ed Code. So the language from AB 132 that described the purposes and activities of the advisory board. So there was some alignment there. The quorum for advisory boards was adjusted to be a simple majority. So that's 9 members of the 16-person body. And then the third point, the language now clarifies that there are times when advisory board members are making suggestions as opposed to formal recommendations to the governing board. And you experienced some of this in your meetings last fall when you asked during the meeting, and some of you asked afterwards, how is it that we as advisory boards will make recommendations to the governing board? Is it just through ad hoc comments in these public meetings? Is there a more formal process? And so what this language is intending to do is to create a distinction between kind of the more informal suggestions that you make, like you will today in this meeting, to us as staff, and that can inform our work, and when you come together as a body to make a formal recommendation for the governing board to consider. So the language then describes the process for bringing formal recommendations forward for the 2 boards. So for you here in the Community Engagement Advisory Board, those formal recommendations would relate to what's called the Community Engagement Framework. This is something that was developed during the planning process. So we have a starting point, and it can then be kind of a living document that you as a body continue to strengthen and develop over time, and that can really then guide our work. You'll see an example of this later today when Shannon presents the work that she has planned on community engagement and how she drew from that community engagement framework document in doing that. So you can start to imagine how any future recommendations you make to update that can then help shape the work that our office does. And then for context, your colleagues in the Data and Tools Advisory Board, they're tasked with 3 specific venues for potentially making recommendations as well. So one would be identifying additional data points that they would like the governing board to request for that linked analytical data set, the P20W data set. The second area would be recommendations relevant to the researcher data request process. So remember, that's the process we'll develop in the future for researchers to access and be able to do research on the underlying data that we use for the dashboards and other tools. And then the third area where they can make recommendations is on tools such as dashboards or operational tools. And then the 5th area of edits was to align decision-making for recommendations with the agreement scale used by the governing board rather than by consensus. That's vote to agree or agree with reservations or disagree. So that's the overview. Now we're going to dive into a bit of a cut and paste from the governance manual. So again, if you would like to look at that, perhaps we can drop a link in the chat to the governance manual for members of the public as well. All right, so the Community Engagement Advisory Board. Through feedback provided in meetings, Community Engagement Advisory Board members offer suggestions for the governing board and the office, including but not limited to. So again, remember, part of the purpose of this language is to distinguish between less formal suggestions and specific recommendations. So right now we're on the less formal suggestions side. So offering ideas in our meetings on things like professional development and technical assistance models that foster evidence-based decision-making, strengthen analytical capacity to use available data tools, and enable end users to understand structural factors that influence outcomes. The second area is communication structures to ensure that a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools that we're building. And the third area is feedback loops to ensure meaningful public input on available information and equitable access to information to ensure utilization, right? We want to make sure we're building things that are actually useful and actually used. Next slide, please. So now that was informal suggestions in the meetings. Now we're talking about more formal recommendations that you as a body would give to the governing board. When there are significant gaps regarding feedback loops with data users, evidence-based decision-making, and analytical capacity, and equitable access to information, the advisory board, so this advisory board, the community engagement one, may make formal recommendations about the community engagement framework to the governing board for ways to improve feedback loops. And perhaps in a moment as well, we can drop a link to that community engagement framework that was developed in the planning process so the public can also see that. I'll also mention that all of these materials are on our governing board page as well as our agenda, our calendar event for today if you've just dialed in and you're interested in seeing the big picture. Next slide, please. So the structure for this process of developing formal engagement recommendation would be that at the fall advisory board meeting, you advisory board members may bring forward proposals for ways to amend the community engagement framework to address that significant gap, if you identify a significant gap. So proposals may be submitted using a form that specifies the following things that are listed here on the slide. So this would be a structured way for each individual advisory board member can identify a gap and ways to address it. So what action should be taken, who would benefit from this action, who would implement it, and how does this relate to the mission and vision of C2C? Next slide. So then each of you would have the option to submit such a form if you want to for a proposed recommendation. Those forms must be submitted 1 month before the advisory board meeting, and we would post that for the public to see on the Cradle-to-Career website. Then using a pre-meeting survey, you would rank order those proposals using a rubric that we'll develop as an office to support you in evaluating the proposals to examine potential impact and align it with the Cradle-to-Career vision, mission, and our authority. So any of you could submit such a form. It's posted publicly. Then using a pre-meeting survey, you would rank order these using a rubric. Next slide. Then at that fall advisory board meeting, we would use that pre-meeting survey to identify 3 proposals that you prioritized in the pre-meeting survey for you to then consider at the meeting. The advisory board member who submitted the proposal will present that idea to the advisory board, followed by public comment. Then you would discuss the proposal to evaluate whether the proposal would effectively address the issue that has been flagged and would meaningfully advance our work. You could then make amendments to the proposal, and then before voting, there would be another period of public comment. For the voting, you would then, as advisory board members, be asked to vote on whether the proposal should be advanced to the office so it can conduct a feasibility study. So as is highlighted in the governance manual, the order of operations is you develop a recommendation, and then our office conducts a feasibility study, and then you revisit it after the feasibility study is concluded. So for the voting, this is the same agreement scale that the governing board uses, but the vote shall require a simple majority of the advisory board members present at the meeting, and you can vote to approve or vote to agree with reservations, or you could disagree. If you agree with reservations or disagree, you can enter the reason for that in the record, and you could also abstain. So this is the voting approach to it. And then in the spring advisory board meeting, our office would present on the feasibility studies that we would have done at that point on the recommendations that you decided to advance to the feasibility study stage. You would then have an opportunity to discuss the findings, amend the proposal if needed, and then vote on whether the proposal should be advanced to the governing board as a recommendation. And then the same voting protocol we just discussed would be used for the process of deciding to advance the recommendation. Okay, so let's go back to the prior slide. Let me just pause for a minute. I just walked through a lot of details and I understand it's a bit dense. This is all all of the information that we just walked through is cut and pasted from the relevant sections. It's around page 30 or so is where the advisory board section starts of the governance manual. Feel free to look at that as a resource as well. Let me pause and see if there are any questions, comments, reflections on this process and what that will mean for you as an advisory board.
We've got Lauren Asher raising her hand. Lauren?
Thanks. I had a couple of just quick questions. One is this rubric for ranking the possible proposals. Is that going to be developed with input from the advisory board? It says it'll be developed by the staff, and I'd love for us to have some input into that to make sure it has enough flexibility to be relevant to different kinds of recommendations.
Yes, we'd be happy to. So we'd be happy for you to provide input. We want to make sure we put the burden of the work on us to get it started and create a first draft. It's always easier to react to something than to devise from a blank page. Why don't we put some thought into the timeline? We'll get to the meetings in a moment. We do have a joint meeting in June that would leave enough time prior to your fall meeting for us to share a draft of the rubric with you for your input then. So let me make that a next step for our team, and we'll think about how we can best get your input either in the meeting or offline. But agreed, and I also imagine that it would be helpful for you to know what the rubric is prior to developing a recommendation. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you. And just one other quick thing in terms, and first, just broadly, this is very helpful. Really appreciate having it all in front of us before the meeting to review. My only other question was on page 36, the exact language of the advisory board may make formal recommendations about the community engagement framework for ways to improve feedback loops. So specifically just feedback loops. And I'm wondering if it might help, not in this moment, but to make sure we're all kind of clear on what we mean by that and what it might exclude. One of the reasons I was asking is because sometimes the design of the tools themselves affects people's ability to engage with and provide feedback on them. So I don't know what the interaction is with the tools and data group or how that might fit in. We don't have to resolve it here. I just wanted to flag it.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that. You're pinpointing one of the things that the governing board was trying to work through with this language, which is to try to clarify what is the community engagement advisory board focusing on and what is the data and tools advisory board focusing on. But to your first point on what's within scope for updating on that community engagement framework document, we can work to provide some clarification on that before the fall meeting so that that's clear. And then we'll also take a note to put careful thought into how to think about the scope of this advisory board's recommendations and the data and tools advisory board's recommendations, understanding that this is all linked, as you mentioned, right? The actual structure of a dashboard can determine how accessible it is to people. It's not just about how you get the word out. So thank you for raising that point.
Thank you.
And welcome any other comments, thoughts, ideas. All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to move on in the agenda, but if more questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. As I mentioned, you're the inaugural board. We're all doing this together for the first time, so we're very open to your ideas and would love to develop this work collaboratively. All right, what we'll do next is look at our timelines and some of our upcoming meetings. Okay, so I wanted to walk through the changes to the governance manual first, because that now our upcoming meetings will make sense in light of all of that. So in June, we're going to have a combined meeting of the community engagement and the data and tools advisory boards. And we wanted to combine that meeting for two reasons. One, some of you suggested it. So in our fall meetings, some of their suggestion came up that, why don't we combine these advisory boards sometimes? For the reasons that Lauren mentioned, there's a lot of connection points between what you're focusing on and what they are focusing on. So we're having that joint combined meeting. Another purpose of that meeting is that if you perused the entire governance manual in your free time, the Data and Tools Advisory Board, one of the ideas that came from your ad hoc committee in December was to have a meeting where we invite our data partners, their subject matter experts, to come to this joint meeting with you, and in particular with the Data Tools Advisory Board members as well, so that they can ask questions of the data providers and really understand the nuances of their available data at a level of detail that helps them provide informed recommendations. So some of the advisory board members had flagged, really wanting to have an opportunity to interact with the data providers to see whether ideas that they have on existing data points, for instance, or useful ways for us to make them available can really be grounded in the subject matter expertise of our data providers. So that's the purpose of the June 6th meeting. And that's going to be a joint one between both advisory boards. And then at the August 9th governing board meeting, I just wanted to flag that that's the governing board meeting where the governing board will appoint new members to this body. So moving forward, everyone will have 3-year terms. Your terms for this first advisory board were staggered, with some of you being appointed for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So each year, a third of the board turns over and the governing board appoints new members. We'll be releasing applications around our May governing board meeting. So we'll get the word out to you so you can encourage others to apply as well, but just wanted to make sure you understand that timeline. And then your next meeting, just as the Community Engagement Advisory Board, would be on September 12th. And the purpose of that meeting is to prioritize up to 3 recommendations using the process that we just talked through. And then I wanted to clarify the members of this board who were assigned a 1-year term when they were appointed. So these are the members who would cycle off the board in August. So these members will still be with us for the June meeting, and then we'll cycle off and the board will appoint new members. And as I mentioned, moving forward, all new members will serve a 3-year term. You can look at page 32 of the governance manual for more details on this. And then just a quick flag, we're meeting virtually today. We will meet virtually for the meeting in June. After July 1st, the ability to host Bagley Key meetings virtually will expire. So all of your meetings as a body, both our full advisory board meetings and any ad hoc committee meetings that you decide to create, will all need to be in person under Bagley Keen. So I wanted to flag that so you can keep that in mind for your September meeting. We will be meeting in person in Sacramento. All right, any questions or clarifications on the timeline? Okay, it is 10:43, so let's come back at 10:52 and we'll take a 5-minute break.
Marianne, 10:48.
Thank you, Shannon. We will come back at 10:48. I just gave you a 10-minute break instead of a 5-1. We'll come back at 10:48, take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hope everyone was able to enjoy a quick break. It's 10:48, so we're going to continue after our 5-minute break. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Shannon, who's going to share a presentation related on planned outreach and communications. Just want to acknowledge what we talked about at the very beginning for anyone who has joined partway through. We have a lot of wind and weather today across the state. So some people might not be turning on their videos. We understand that, and we appreciate everyone's patience as our connectivity might come and go. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And that is a way of saying that I will be off camera. My connection has gotten a little bit shaky, so apologies that you will not be able to see my face, but I hope that you will at least be able to hear me as we speak. And we just had a question in the Q&A about webinars, and yes, the members of the public will not be on camera, so wanted to answer that one live for the attendee who asked that question. So good morning, everyone. I hope that you had a nice break. My name is Shannon Serrato. I'm the Director of Engagement here at Cradle-to-Career. For today's session, I'm going to provide an overview of C2C's planned outreach and communications related to californiacolleges.edu, the state's one-stop shop for college and financial aid planning. A key directive of the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data under AB 132 is to scale existing operational tools which support college planning and education transitions to better serve educators, students, and their families. Keeping that in mind, I want to highlight the student experience audit that we conducted in the fall in partnership with WETSTED, which surfaced that the college-going experience is much more complicated than it needs to be.
Shannon, I'm going to interrupt. Oh, thank you, Fabiola.
Yes. Fabiola? Okay, I will slow down. Okay, apologies for that. So the student experience audit, we heard that a lot of difficulties that students and families face stem from a lack of awareness about how to successfully navigate processes and a lack of clarity about where to go to access that information. But fortunately, we also identified that many of these issues could be addressed through the usage of existing operational tools under the C2C umbrella. People just need to know about them. And we discussed ways C2C partners can come together to increase awareness of practical tools during C2C's February 8th governing board meeting, which laid the foundation for our conversation today. Next slide, please. Much like you all, Cradle-to-Career's governing board members, many of whom represent data providers, the higher ed segments, and community advocates are not only tasked with supporting the efforts of the C2C office, but are really invested in advancing equity by supporting California students and their families. During our governing board meeting, members discussed how the office and partners could come together to increase awareness of operational tools. And today I want to share upcoming plans for your thoughts on how C2C partners can leverage joint communications efforts to scale student-facing tools. As Marianne noted earlier in today's discussion, we have been taking into consideration the community engagement plan developed during the planning process to help guide our communications work. I will flag that some of the recommendations we are centering throughout today's discussion illustrate how that guidance could be embedded in our work, as well as a way to get your wheels turning about the parts of the plan we want to keep or potentially iterate on, which you as community engagement advisory board members will bring forward to the governing board. So on your screen is our overall goal for messaging around our student-facing tools, which is first and foremost to ensure that Californians know about C2C's work and the work of our partners, including our practical tools, and that they find the work useful, see themselves in the process, and take action. As part of that goal, we are working to ensure that we define clear communications objectives, define key target audiences and customize messaging by personas, identify opportunities for input and feedback, set target metrics for reach and usage, ensure accessibility, which includes ensuring materials are translated into the languages of the populations that we serve, and set inclusive norms for communications. Next slide, please. So now that we've reviewed the overall goals of our work, I would like to drill down californiacolleges.edu, the most time-bound component of C2C's operational tools. As it exists now, the online platform is available to students and families who attend schools in participating districts, though we anticipate that soon, Relatively speaking, 2024 free basic accounts will be available to all students in California in partnership with California Department of Education. And it would be amazing for segments to come together with a unified message that will reach differing audiences based on people's expertise and outreach. Apologies. Can you go back, please? To reach differing audiences and varying channels to champion California colleges and universal basic accounts that will soon be available to all students in California. In anticipation of that milestone, we would like to do our due diligence to ensure that folks are aware of the platform generally, which has been made easier with the launch of californiacolleges.edu's resource hub. As many people in the community have noted, though comprehensive, it has been difficult to fully understand the depth and breadth of California College's platform if you don't have access to the account. So I'm super excited that CCGI has recently launched a companion site, its resource hub available at californiacolleges.edu/learn more, which provides an overview of the platform without you ever having to log in. The resource hub breaks down learning by key stakeholders, including students, parents, educators, and school districts, and provides comprehensive information through videos, tutorials, and testimonials. Next slide, please. So with the new resource hub and basic accounts coming soon, we've got a couple of items on the docket for promotion that can truly ramp up the visibility of the operational tool with the goal of segment partners coming together in a unified effort. With plans to solidify an agreement to bring free basic accounts to all students in 2024, C2C would like to first promote the agreement, setting the stage for future joint communications campaigns while helping build awareness, enhancing the legitimacy of californiacolleges.edu as the state's official college and career planning platform, and then launch an informational campaign of the platform in partnership with C2C supporters that leans on the resource hub to increase awareness of the platform for students and families in the state. Through a coordinated email campaign, we're hoping to share an infographic available in multiple languages that features the logos of segment partners, promoting the operational tool who will disseminate the flyer in a coordinated effort to provide information to districts that are currently partnering with CCGI, as well as those that are not, to increase awareness in advance of the basic account rollout. Next slide, please. And thank you, Ryan, for dropping that in the chat. And I see a question from Mayor. Where in the resource hub can we learn about the translation available for Cal College's tools and pages? I will put a pin in that. I know that we have some folks on the line from californiacolleges.edu who may be able to help with that. And if not, Mayor, I will follow up. And then Renzo says, are free basic accounts the same things as student accounts? So these will be accounts for students. Okay. So once basic accounts become available in 2024, we will focus on a more in-depth communication campaign that will build on the foundation and increased awareness of the platform overall. We will develop a unified communications campaign that we will coordinate across segments through joint email communications, an informational flyer focused specifically on basic accounts, and an accompanying social media campaign. Next slide, please. Okay. So now that I've laid out the foundation of our communications plan for student facing tools, it's time to hear from you. How can we ensure that there's more awareness of existing practical tools so more students can benefit? Please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you have thoughts. I'm seeing in the chat that folks are excited about the resource hub, which is great. Jackie.
I know, having worked with californiacolleges.edu for years, one of the challenges has been, making sure the administrators of the LEAs are supporting the work at the staffing level. And so I don't know if there's a way to discuss this with our superintendents in the state, so that way we can, communicate it from the top down. I think that would be really helpful from the boots on the ground, efforts to be able to have it reflected in the voices from our superintendents and our administrators at the local school sites.
Great, thank you so much, Jackie. Mayor, let's see your hands raised.
Right, thank you. Yes. just wanted to see if it's possible to find out which schools and districts are using either the data sharing or the open access basic accounts. I think it helps us to know where there is already usage to connect potential new users with existing users in the same region.
That's a good flag. Mayor, I don't have the link handy, but I know on the Resource Hub, there is a page that specifically details which districts are currently partnering. So you can find that on the Resource Hub.
Right, but just as a follow-up, I don't think it has like the open access users.
Okay.
So the ones that have access to the basic accounts.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That's a good flag. And then I see from Arcadia, she says, partner with federally funded projects, TRIO, Gear Up, and other outreach programs and efforts. And Lauren says she seconds Jackie's point regarding LEAs as well as Arcadia's. Perfect, thank you so much. Any other ideas around this question? Jackie, sorry.
Sorry, so sorry to speak without raising my hand. Another thing that I've found has been very effective that Governor Newsom has done is to do the Facebook Live events. I don't know if we maybe consider doing something like that with our families in, in that venue. I don't know what the ramifications are, but I know it's been really effective. Governor Newsom's shared a lot of information through that venue, and with our population of parents, it might be effective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Patricia?
Yeah, I would second that. I think social media, depending on obviously your target audience, younger students, Twitter and Instagram, parents, Facebook, but it's, you get analytics also, so it's measurable, which is great. And you can target it for region, and it translates on its own, at least if it's written. But I think social media would be a great medium to get it out there. And you could try different voices as well.
Thank you. And I think Nancy's also in agreement. She says as well as YouTube and TikTok, for as long as it lasts, as promotional areas. Mayor, is your hand raised again?
It is. I just thought I'd piggyback on the social media that CSAC gave a great presentation about how they engage like the Warriors for a PSA. So like Steph Curry as well as the coach. And so engaging those kind of folks that, might excite students might be worth considering. It looked like it was like a 3 to 5x growth in hits when they engaged those kind of influencers.
I love that. Let's bring Steph Curry in. Sveve, you can unmute.
Yeah, I'm thinking about ethnic media and non-English speaking media and how they are very important to reaching parents and other adult caregivers of children. There's Spanish only there's Spanish only radio, Cantonese only radio and newspaper outlets. There's anyway, so I just wanted to ensure that we were also reaching the non-English speaking media in the state that are actually really good at reaching older adults as they set up these accounts or help reach these accounts for their children.
Thank you, Sveta. That's a good flag. And also, as I see in the chat, not only ethnic media, but also radio will be really helpful in getting the messaging out as well. So thank you for flagging that. Patricia?
And then this was in the chat, some of our nonprofit partners that are focused on supporting families with, career readiness. You have MANA, the Hermanita program. You have a lot of different organizations that are focused on that, and they include their parents in it. So I think that could be a good medium, those specific nonprofits.
Great, thank you. And I just want to, since you pointed it out, Patricia, Lauren did flag plus nonprofit youth service providers with statewide networks like Boys and Girls Clubs, Scouts, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And Laleen responded to Mayor's question about districts using basic accounts. She dropped the link in the chat. And then Tess replied to Renzo, yes, basic accounts are the students' accounts we're working on with you, i.e. the ones without transcript data. Transcript informed accounts are called partner accounts. So thank you for clarifying that, Tess. Very helpful to have you on in real time. Other folks, Jackie gave a +1 to Spede. Univision has been supporting the CSUS Feria de Educación, which I think has been effective. Orcadia said, maybe considering partnering with regional unions for our blue collar parents to help host workshops, share information. Mayor said, also target all the regional K-16 collaboratives. For example, the Bay Area K-16 collaborative that I'm involved with can disseminate. Perfect, thank you so much. Patricia says nonprofits like Hope, Mana, and others that focus on career readiness. You did mention that that's in the chat, but I'm just surfacing this now. And then also Mayor gave a +1 to unions, local workforce boards and unions also from Anna. And then Mayor said, I recommend all county youth task forces. I'm scheduling with the Santa Clara County Task Force. Perfect. And Jackie.
I also just was looking at, I know that California College.edu has been heavily involved with the CSU counselor conferences, but also looking at how are we sharing this information at the local community college conferences. Many of our local community colleges have counselor conferences, and as well as like our privates and the UC. So looking at that, and then leveraging continually our work with Cal SOAPs across the state. So I know that California College.edu has been doing a great job with that, but just having the backing of Cradle-to-Career can help. I think create a lot.
Great, thank you. Spede?
So one thing y'all may not know about me is that I'm a total library nerd. And libraries are, a lot of parents and students go there to do homework, to do their applications for college, and it's unclear, I'm not very familiar with kind of the state to county to local library systems and kind of how they all talk to each other, but they all have computer labs where parents and students go to do their business. So engaging with the libraries, I think, might be a good place to publicize this work.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Spede. And I want to give a shout out. She may not be on the line, but one of our colleagues, Brandy Arias, also flagged the usage of public libraries, which I thought was really great. So great minds thinking alike. And Jackie says also perhaps engaging with our teachers unions who often provide webinars. Perfect. Everyone loves libraries. So this has all been super helpful. And then the last thing I wanted to get feedback on in this specific docket item, do you have innovative strategies for outreach? This is a big question, but I ask because in a community conversation, we posed a similar question and folks really gave us really good ideas that I had not thought of. So for example, including informational flyers and utility bills that will go out to folks so that we can reach rural communities was something that I've just been sitting with for a while. And so if any of those things come to mind, I'd be happy to hear them. And also, as always, you can circle back with us, reach out to us via email. As I've stated, we will be following up with your slides. And so that's also an opportunity for you to provide feedback as well. But I would appreciate any thoughts that you may have now. And looks like Jackie has some thoughts.
I just have actually an inquiry. Does anyone know how free reduced lunch applications are disseminated throughout the schools? Because that's something that seems to happen, statewide. And I don't know if that's something we could capture the momentum on.
That's a good question. We'll table that one, Jackie. We'll circle back to it. And then Patricia.
Well, this is very regional, and I know it's hard because it's statewide, but every region has these big events, right? Where the parents come out. In San Diego is Dia de los Niños. Parents come out, thousands of parents come out, and they're engaged. There's booths, and they're going there specifically to get information for their children. That's in April. In Central Valley, I can find it, but it's Universidad de Padres. So the parents come out, and it's specifically to learn about university, and you've got all the nonprofits that are involved in the local schools. So now that we're back in person, in that interaction in that hub, and part of that is the trust. That could be if you're looking at a regional outreach, that could be a strategy that you can look into.
Thank you for flagging that. And we'd be glad to hear about other regional events or other items that may not be on our radar that you all are aware of. So again, if those things come to mind, Patricia, thank you so much for surfacing that. Please make sure, we would love for you to raise them for us so that we can make sure that we are doing our due diligence there. And the comments, Lauren says H&R Block is another good info channel. Mara says toolkits that are themed for the various heritage and history months would be great, like the gender pay gap announcements that are intersection specific to highlight resources and tools. Jackie says May 6th is the college making it happen at CSUS and Cesar Chavez Youth Leadership Conference at UC Davis. And +1 to Mayor on the toolkits. All right, this has been, as always, very exciting as I get to hear from you all about ways that we can really be promoting this work. This is the reason why you all are on the board, because you are so smart and have great insights. So I really just appreciate your thoughts. And again, feel free to reach out to me as always if you have any additional thoughts. But with that, I think we can move on to the next item for today, the next and final item, which is discussion of supports, training, and outreach strategies that should accompany the release of C2C's dashboards. So, as you heard from Marianne earlier, dashboards are top of mind for us here at Cradle-to-Career, and we're working on the launch of a dashboard this calendar year. To that end, I would like to discuss Cradle-to-Career's plans for support, trainings, and outreach strategies that will accompany the release of any of C2C's dashboards going forward. The items that I will be discussing in this section will be universal to all planned C2C dashboards, regardless of focus. But as an existing priority for the Cradle-to-Career office, I'm going to spend a little time highlighting plans for the upcoming teacher training and retention dashboard, the first dashboard on deck for release under Cradle-to-Career. The teacher training and retention dashboard will provide information on teacher workforce trends, including teacher training pipelines, teacher employment and retention, and employment trends for former teachers, highlighting the experiences of marginalized populations. The dashboard will show linked data from our data partners on students and teacher preparation programs, certification, and teacher placement and retention. Next slide, please. Information for the teacher training and retention dashboard will be tailored to show the data by the following variables: academic year, educator characteristics, location of educator training, and where applicable, the location of public school employment. And an export will provide summary tables based on the variables selected. Next slide, please. And as the Community Engagement Advisory Board, you all thinks about the items related to outreach and communications. In a parallel process, the Data and Tools Advisory Board will be focusing on the scope and prioritization of visualizations of the dashboard, which could include the following on the screen, such as the types of certificates or degrees that educator preparation program participants completed at a community college or a four-year institution, the ways educators are trained and credentialed via traditional programs, residency, emergency permits, waivers, the number of people earning full credentials and retention rates, the number of years between earning a credential and securing a position at a California public school, and the median number of years working as an educator. And for those who have stopped working in public education, the industries that hire them and the median change in earnings. Next slide, please. So again, I'm going to highlight input from the planning process that has contributed to the overall communications plan for C2C dashboards, noting identified outreach strategies such as emphasizing asset-based and student-centered approaches to displaying and interpreting information, providing resources in plain language that foster data literacy in multiple languages, integrating resources into the design and the data tools wherever possible. Next slide, please. So now that I've provided an overview of our general goals for dashboard communications, I'm going to hone in on the specific communication goals that the C2C team has been prioritizing as we engage in the user-centered design process for the dashboards. As we develop the initial dashboard plan, we are working to empower users to explore data to address questions and issues that matter to them, regardless of their knowledge level. Create direct support tools for teachers, parents, advisors, and students, and facilitate data literacy to empower users to explore data in their dashboards. Next slide, please. We are excited to embark on the data dashboard work, but we've heard loud and clear from multiple stakeholders that to fully understand the data and questions made available through the dashboard, supplemental products and collateral are needed as wraparound supports to surface the qualitative information necessary to deepen the experience of teachers and clarify the concept of quality and what it means in the 21st century. Next slide. The products and collateral on this screen will be embedded in the C2C website alongside the dashboards as complementary to advance the equity goals of the C2C office by making data accessible and actionable for all Californians, including marginalized communities, and facilitate data literacy across all user types by surfacing information and raising questions to address and tell a richer story about issues that impact specific communities. The community engagement plan noted that we should work to embed resources alongside the dashboard to avoid audience melt. So to fully support the release of the data dashboards, we're proposing the implementation of a survey to gather stories of teachers to fully paint the picture of the teacher experience, tutorials and fact sheets on how to use dashboards, one-pagers on key data points paired with vignettes and stories that will include easy to understand definitions and clearly defined data points, neutral guides by personas as identified during the planning process, person-centered data analysis when using the data, learning agendas or research questions, and the promotion of query builders when they're ready, signaling access to data for our expert users. Next slide, please. So now that we've outlined the proposed data dashboard, the overall communications plans for the dashboard and the supports we will develop, the final slide details the overall goals of our work by user type or persona as identified in the community engagement plan that will provide equitable access to information, professional development, and technical assistance for different stakeholders, and the functionality that adds value to the day-to-day work of our users. We're envisioning the dashboard to be accessed by 3 types of users: occasional visitors to the data who may visit the dashboard to answer one-off or the same repeated question, data ambassadors who can share the data embedded in their communities, and power users who know and love the data and can't wait to get their hands on the raw files. So to that end, we've also broken out goals by type, such as making information easy to access, navigate, and understand for occasional visitors, leveraging supplemental products to facilitate data literacy, and providing professional development and technical assistance to advance occasional visitors to data ambassadors. To facilitate learning, we're gearing tutorials and fact sheets and interactive videos that will help them on their journey to use data dashboards. We will also work to enable the exploration of data and information to advance the data literacy of data ambassadors, developing one-pagers on key data points paired with vignettes and stories, neutral guides by personas, and learning agendas. And finally, while we know that many of our power users will want to get their hands on the data through the query builders, we will focus on person-centered data analysis as supplemental resources to inform individual research, the promotion of data dashboards as a tool for sharing complex findings to a wider audience, and the promotion of future query builders calling for input from power users in advance of the launch. So I'm done talking now, and it's time to hear from you all. Next slide, please. Now that I've laid out the initial plans for supports for the dashboards, what would you recommend the C2C office tailor? How would you recommend the C2C office tailor outreach for the teacher training and retention dashboards? I think I might be able to go back on camera now. I'm very excited. The sun is out, relatively speaking. Jackie.
I'm not sure if this would be appropriate, but one of the things that I've been working with teachers a lot about is compassion fatigue. And I don't know if being able to provide, some outreach for support might then help people to be more engaged with, the dashboard. I'm not quite sure if that's appropriate or not, but I thought I'd put it out there and let other people think about it.
Thank you, Jackie. Lauren says, also think about ways to reach and activate grandparents, senior centers, AARP, PSAs on relevant media outlets. Robert Gomez says, start with text-based dashboards since most people just want the data. Pretty visualizations are nice, but can be a hurdle to get past. Thank you, Robert. We've got some folks saying, thank you, Lauren, using inclusive language that considers how other educators, school counselors, other staff interface with the platform. And Patricia, I'm sorry, I saw your hand up.
No, you started reading some of my thoughts, so I'm like, I'll just
okay. Great.
And your question is more toward voice instead of connections, right? Okay.
Yes, but if you have thoughts and connections, I would be glad to hear them as well.
Well, I was thinking of county. I know SEAL, our organization, does teacher development and teacher training, and there's many organizations that work with their local county offices. So that could be a way too. And in terms of voice, every region's so different, right? So I think that's always a good connection within those county regions.
Yes, I appreciate you surfacing the regional aspects. I know that that's a lot of work to do, but we're excited to begin engaging in that. And it makes sense for us to be thinking about ways that we can tailor those communications by region and population. Any other thoughts from this group today? Jackie, again, I see your hand. No, not again, just I see your hand.
We've just been having this conversation recently, with regards to our career education. So industry-based individuals who are now coming into teaching and looking at how are we providing onboarding when maybe they might come in the middle of the year. And, you look at the Great Resignation. So we have a lot of knowledge loss that's happening. And so, something along the lines of, maintaining the teachers, retaining them is helping to make sure that they're onboarded properly, that they know, how to get the supports. And I don't, know if that's something that can be covered fully at a state level, but I think there's some elements that could be covered at a state level that, would help with some of that onboarding.
Thank you. Nancy says we have connections to undocumented educators, and they would be an important population to ensure we include in the outreach. Thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate you flagging that. Robert says anticipating major ways that this data can be used and concrete examples can be useful. Definitely. You also said ask how people use the data. Many faculty I work with need specific numbers for various program reviews, outcome assessments, and planning. That's a good flag about usage. Thank you. All right, I think that is it, folks. I appreciate all of your input today. You all have given us so much to work with. We're at the crucial point now where we're really starting to engage this work. So this is the perfect time for us to be having this conversation as we really start outreach and rolling out some of the things that we've been talking about with you all for so long. So I'm very, very excited and very, very glad to have you all today. So engaged in the process, so engaged in the conversation, and so engaged in our work. So just thank you again. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over for public comments.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We now invite members of the public who want to comment to use the chat feature to send a message via the Q&A function to indicate your interest. During the public comment period, a staff member will unmute you when it's your turn. You will have 2 minutes to comment. Please note that while C2C intends to promote transparency, C2C advisory board members and staff are not required to respond to public comment. Additionally, the advisory board may not discuss or act on any matter raised during the public comment period that is not included on the meeting agenda, except to place the matter on a future meeting agenda. You may also submit written public comments to info@c2c.ca.gov. So we're looking now for any questions coming in on the Q&A or in the chat.
I do not see any hand raised or anything in the chat as of the moment. We did get one comment from Kim McNulty. I'll read it right now. I'd be happy to be an additional point of contact for the communities in the Coachella Valley. Our organization, One Future Coachella Valley, is a regional intermediary connecting our local K-12 districts, higher ed, and community partners. I'm really impressed with the work you are going. Excellent ideas shared today. And I believe that was work you're doing. Perfect. And I see no other hands raised. Want to reconfirm that.
Seeing no hands.
Team, Michaela and I are sitting in the car leaving.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. Thank you to all the advisory board members. We really appreciated your engagement today. If there are no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting momentarily. I do want to put in a request. If we've had a practice of inviting an advisory board member to report out at the next governing board meeting on what was discussed in advisory board meetings, if that's something you would be interested in doing, please send an email to Mary Kate or to me, and we can put you on the list for the May board meeting. So if you'd like to volunteer to do the report out at the May governing board meeting, that one will be virtual. You can feel free to send Mary Kate a note. So with that, and hearing no objections, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.